Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bones. I'm Craig.
I'm Carson.
And I'm Dominic.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. This week, President Trump issued an executive order to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. Now, this has caused quite a stir in that there is much debate over whether or not the order goes too far or not far enough. Carson, I want to get your take on this. Would you say this is anti-free speech, and why?
Yeah, I think the executive order is one of Trump's most egregious actions against free speech. I mean, you have some other things that he's done in the past. Specifically he campaigned on putting a 1-year jail sentence for flag burning, which is obviously anti-free speech. The Supreme Court has rolled on this. But this specifically seems even worse than that. It seems even more broad. And what it does is it essentially instructs the government to go out of its way to find ways to combat anti-Semitism, which is, such broad phrasing. And he says the executive order actually has a focus on non-citizens. So essentially, if you are a non-citizen who is doing anti-Semitism, or supporting Palestine, and in some cases maybe going further than that, then you are going to get deported. So specifically foreign students. So I think that's a little absurd. The Constitution applies to everyone, and I think you should have the right to say basically whatever you want, unless you are threatening someone else's life. There are very specific rules for this. The Supreme Court, again, has ruled on this. We know what the general guidelines for and the restrictions of free speech are, and this is not one of them. So you do not get to infringe on other people's free speech, even if they are non-citizens.
Gotcha. Dominic, what is your case for this order?
Yeah, so I mostly disagree with what Carson just said, but I think that anti-Semitism has been a huge issue on college campuses after the start of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and many Jewish students have felt threatened and unsafe on their campuses with a lot of the threats made by anti-Semites and pro-Palestine protesters. And I think that if you are a non-citizen here on a student visa, you have no right to be promoting terrorist and anti-American ideology that poses a threat to your college campus, and that the executive order is justified in trying to deport these people spreading the dangerous ideology.
Gotcha. And now, I guess you have to draw a line somewhere, right? So how far do you go in terms of the deportations and saying what you are doing should not be allowed? Because there is a difference between someone who may support Palestine and the civilians who have died there versus supporting Hamas.
Well, yeah, I definitely think that you do have to make a distinction there, because some of them are peacefully protesting and do not support the actions of the terrorist organization itself. So, yeah, maybe the executive order should be more geared towards students who are actively supporting terrorism or threatening Jewish students on college campuses.
Mm-hmm. I can agree with that. Carson, how do you feel about that? Is the executive order too broad, and why?
Yeah, so just to be clear, there's a few things I want to push back on what Dominic said. Number one, if you are threatening a Jewish student, whether they're Jewish or not, whoever you're threatening, that is illegal. It is very clearly illegal. It is illegal even with the First Amendment. You cannot threaten people with any sort of specificity, or really threaten people at all. So, yeah, that's very clear. You don't need an executive order to prevent the threatening people. Now, if we're talking about supporting Hamas terrorists, which is a very broad term that gets thrown around a lot, my positions have been called supporting Hamas terrorists, and I really do not support Hamas at all. I do believe that they are a terrorist organization. I just happen to also not support the government of Israel. But I still get called supporting Hamas terrorists. So we need very, very specific terminology here. And the problem is, the government is not great at specificity. Let's be clear. The government is not great at setting good guidelines and effective guidelines that actually show whether you are supporting terrorism. So it's such a broad thing that, unless you are doing what Dominic said, which is threatening students on campus, unless you're doing that, or you're committing some other crime. I know some people have been doing vandalism. I know some people have been, threatening violence. So there are crimes that are being committed. I'm not denying that. But unless you're doing those crimes, then there should be, and even if you are doing those crimes, maybe threatening violence is different, but vandalism, are we deporting people over vandalism? I don't know. But, if you're doing those crimes, yeah, we need to address those, but we don't address people who are supporting terrorists. There are so many different times throughout our history where something has been supporting terrorism. This was used to shut down labor unions in the early 1910s. This is used to shut down people who were both pro and anti-prohibition in the late 19th century. This has been used so long. This was used to shut down anti-Vietnam War protesters in the 1970s. We all know how that turned out. So come on, we don't need to do this. We don't need to say that someone is supporting terrorism. We can just let people say what they like. We don't need these distinctions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think given the First Amendment, it's really tough to say, well, we're going to put conditions on what you say. Now, whether or not we can go further and apply, say, helping Hamas, certainly illegal, but advocating for them, does that qualify as protected speech? That is something where, if you're a non-citizen, I think that there's a case to be made in terms of, look, to become a citizen, one of the requirements is that you are a person of good character. That's a specific requirement. So I would say that they are violating that principle by supporting Hamas. However, you have to be specific in what you deem supporting Hamas. I don't think that if you just went out in the streets and said, end the war in the Middle East, stop Israel, and I support Israel, by the way, but if you're on that side, I don't think that you should be sent back just for that reason. Additionally, we have more important, violent, illegal aliens to take care of. So, frankly, I don't want to tie up the deportations with people who may disagree with me on Middle Eastern conflict. I think that it's more important that we focus on, look, these are the murderers and the rapists, and we have to send them back to their country of origin, rather than this person from Lithuania says that Palestine is good. So that's where I stand on that. But Dominic, how do you feel, and what can you say to Carson's points?
Yeah, well, I think simply saying anything that would be pro-Hamas is enough to justify deportation, because these students are coming here to our universities to learn. They are not supposed to be here to be supporting dangerous and harmful ideologies and pro-terrorist sentiments, because Hamas is a horrific terrorist organization that has not only committed acts of violence against Israelis, but also American citizens by keeping them hostage. So I think that any statements that support that organization are completely unacceptable and grounds for deportation.
Gotcha. Carson, do you have a closing thought on this matter?
Yeah, I just want to say, on October 6, 2023, 2023 had already been the most deadly year for Palestinians yet in the entire existence of the country of Israel. In 2023, prior to the October 7th attacks, 2023 was the deadliest year for Palestinians. And so I want to say, you really can't make these broad, sweeping moral statements that Hamas is evil without making the qualifier that who they're fighting is also evil. They're both evil, frankly. The Israeli government has committed some heinous atrocities. People advocating for the Israeli government have done some heinous things as well. And so I just cannot imagine saying, oh, we are going to condemn this violence. I mean, why not just condemn anyone supporting any movement anywhere? Everything is morally gray. And obviously the Hamas, I strongly believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization. I also strongly believe that the country of Israel has done terrible, terrible things in the past year and a half now. And they continue to do terrible things under the leadership of Bibi Netanyahu. So this is all so relative, and I don't think you can just make these sweeping judgments. I don't think it's the government's place to make those sweeping judgments. And frankly, by that logic, I would deport everyone who supports the country of Israel. I mean, it simply is flawed logic.
That being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload 3 times a week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out at youthbombs@electoralrepublicans.com. Thanks so much, everyone.